Here's a list of the shitty things Tony Stark did in the superhero Civil War. Before the Civil War even begins, Tony pulls Peter Parker to the side and has a one-on-one with him, basically telling him he wants Pete to be his protege. Not too recently, Peter Parker's apartment and Aunt May's house had been burned to the ground by a random villain. Tony had invited Peter, MJ, and Aunt May to come live in Avengers Tower with them. Because of this, Pete feels like he owes Stark something, so he tells Tony whatever he needs. He has his blood oath with Pete. After they shake hands and Pete agrees to do whatever Tony says, basically without question, Tony drops the Superhero Registration Act in Peter's lap. To be fair, Tony was completely against it at first. He appeared in DC to advocate on the side of superheroes before the whole Civil War kicked off. But while he was there, he almost got assassinated by the Titanium Man, who, as it would turn out, was actually hired by Tony Stark himself. He lies to Peter and tells him that he has no idea why Titanium Man knew where he was or even to show up at this time, and Tony was trying to use the assassination attempt to convince Congress that superheroes needed to be left alone. You can see a clear pattern of manipulation here. But that was all before the Stanford incident. After that happened and Tony knew there was no going back, he told Peter the only way they could work together is if Spider-Man unmasked to the public, and being a man of his word, even though he's completely conflicted about it, he listens to Tony and reveals his identity to the world. Despite Tony's reassurance that his family would be kept safe, Pete and MJ are almost immediately shot afterwards. On top of that, Tony publicly announced that Spider-Man would be a part of the superhero task force team that will take down people that refuse to register, basically signing Pete up to fight and arrest his friends, even though he never told Tony he was okay with that. And even though Tony made Pete his nice new Iron Spider suit, turned out he was using it to spy on Peter and collect data on him. As we would later find out, Tony was also using the suit as a contingency plan if Peter ever flipped sides. He was going to just basically lock him up in the thing. But Peter had already hacked it because he figured that was coming. While all this was going on, Stark Enterprises had received billions of dollars from the government and his stock had never been higher. Part of that money was being used to create a Supermax prison inside of the negative zone for their friends, which is where Pete learns that Tony's plan is just to lock all the heroes up who refuse to register here for life, forever, with no trial and no chance of ever getting out. As the superhero Civil War escalated, Tony's side was using villains to help fight their fight, which the irony of that is unreal. Created a cyborg clone of Thor, which ended up killing their friend Bill Foster in battle. In the big final battle of the superhero Civil War, they destroy several city blocks in the process. Keep in mind the whole thought process behind the Superhero Registration Act is to keep shit like this from happening. But Steve's the one who surrenders and calls the fight off when he looks around and sees all the damage, not Tony and not Tony's side. Tony wanted to make sure they really sent a message with Steve since he was the leader of the opposition, so they were holding a big public trial for him. This leads to him getting assassinated before the trial could ever even begin. Also have to take into consideration that Tony was the reason Pete unmasked and revealed his identity to the world. This then leads to Aunt May getting shot. And this, of course, leads to Pete giving up his marriage with MJ and rewriting his history in order to save May's life. Needless to say, during this entire thing, Tony was kind of a dick.